بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى اللهم وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. ربي زدنا علما ولا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وارزقنا علما نافعا يا رب العالمين وعملا متقبلا مخلصا لوجهك يا أرحم الراحمين. Welcome to this series together titled Environmental Realities and Reflections. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He make it one that is beneficial for all of us, that He make it an effort that is accepted inshaAllah ta'ala, and that He make it a source of khair, of good for us and our families and our communities and our ummah inshaAllah ta'ala. My dear beloved brothers and sisters, we live in a time of unprecedented human-caused, human-induced damage to the environment. Whether we are referring to water pollution, we are contaminating, we are polluting our rivers, our lakes, our oceans through our agricultural waste, our industrial waste, our commercial, our residential waste. 11 million tons of plastic make their way to our oceans every year. Whether we talk about our earth, our soil, we are polluting and contaminating our soil through our industrial waste, our pesticides, our chemicals, essentially poisoning our ground. And when we poison our ground and our soil, we poison our animals and our crops, and essentially we poison ourselves. We live in a time where in unprecedented ways as well, we are contaminating, we are polluting, we are poisoning our air through the exhaust from our factories and our cars and our other innovations. We are also contaminating and changing actually our climate, again in unnatural and unprecedented ways, and we're seeing and we're learning about the very damaging and very real consequences of that on massive levels. Through the different activities that we are engaging in today, as well as mankind, we are also losing many of the beautiful species in our on this earth, to the extent that there's a 70% population decline in mammals and birds and fish just in these last 40 years. Also, we expect to lose another 500 species to extinction in the next 20 years. This type of unprecedented, damage is something that should be a wake-up call for all of us. And the amount of food that we waste, the sustenance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided for us, 1/3 of the food that we have available that is produced for us is wasted at some point in its life cycle from when it is produced until consumption. And finally, and as we will explain further later, we are essentially also degrading our other environments, our moral environment, our social environment, our community, our family environment, again in unprecedented ways. And the question I ask myself and I ask all of us is this how it should be? Is there a better way? Is this what is beloved to the Creator subhanahu wa ta'ala? Is this what is beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And the answer is no. And the answer is yes, there is a better way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, for example, speaking about individuals, He says, وَإِذَا تَوَلَّى فِي الْأَرْضِ سَعَى وَإِذَا تَوَلَّى سَعَى فِي الْأَرْضِ لِيُفْسِدَ فِيهَا وَيُهْلِكَ الْحَرْثَ وَالنَّسْلِ وَاللَّهُ لَا يُحِبُّ الْفَسَادِ. He says about individuals that they strive through the earth. سَعَى فِي الْأَرْضِ. For what purpose? لِيُفْسِدَ فِيهَا. So that he corrupts that earth. وَيُهْلِكَ الْحَرْثَ وَالنَّسْلِ. And that he corrupts the crops and the animals. وَاللَّهُ لَا يُحِبُّ الْفَسَادِ. And Allah does not love this corruption. He says subhanahu wa ta'ala also, ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس ليذيقهم بعض الذي عملوا لعلهم يرجعون. He says subhanahu wa ta'ala that again corruption, fasad, has appeared on the earth, on the land, and in the seas. ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر. from what? What is the cause of that? ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس, by what human beings have earned with their own hands. That is the cause, that's the underlying cause of that. And what is the wisdom behind that? What is happening? ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس ليذيقهم بعض الذي عملوا. So that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would cause the human being to taste from some of what he has done and she has done, the fruits, to reap some of the fruits, in this case, evil fruits that he or she has done. And then finally, or before that, when he says subhanahu wa ta'ala ليذيقهم بعض الذي عملوا, it's as if the environmental degradation that we see in front of us, that we mentioned some of, and there's much more of the various types, is an indication of the reality of our own actions. It's directly correlated to our actions. What we see on the outside of degradation tells us the nature of our actions, whether that they be good or positive, or negative and harmful, depending on what we see in the environment. And finally, he says subhanahu wa ta'ala, لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْجِعُونَ, so that perhaps when we send them this wake-up call, so when they see this, when they see the fruits of their actions in front of them, now around them, in their water, in their air, in their families, they might return, they might retract, they might change their ways to something that is beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This environmental degradation that we're seeing, again, of all sorts and of all types, we have to realize, and we would argue, that the source of this is a lack of awareness and understanding of the reality of the environment. What is this environment? What does it mean? What is it intended to teach us? Why is it there? What are the deeper meanings underlying the existence of the environment in general and in specifics and in details? And that is what we hope to share in this series, inshallah, together. And we will see that this lack of understanding, this lack of awareness of the nature of the environment is leading to a lack of reverence for the environment. When we don't understand the value of something, we do not deal with it in a way that is appropriate. We lack that reverence to the environment and, unfortunately, to the maker, subhanahu wa ta'ala, of that environment. It leads to that lack, again, of awareness of the reality of the environment. It leads to arrogance, dealing with our environment, whether that be people, animals, plants, the air, etc., in ways that are arrogant, in ways that are selfish and greedy, and in ways that are careless, and in ways that are wasteful, that are essentially ways of israf, of wasting, without any need to do so. And thus, again, similar to what we mentioned before, the environmental condition that we see outside is indicative of the state of our hearts inside. What we see outside tells us how we are inside, positive or negative. And that's why, in a sense, the environment is very useful for me to learn more about myself and to learn more about the condition that we are in. In this series, inshallah ta'ala, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His enabling grace, for His tawfiq, we hope to understand more the reality of this environment, what it means, what is it teaching me, what are the underlying meanings behind it on a deeper level, and not simply a superficial level as it is often studied and understood, and to understand more our relationship with that environment. What type of relationship should we have with that environment, outside of us, inside of us, that we hope will result in us seeing the environment in a different light. When we understand the realities of something and the deeper layers of something, we will see it differently. And when we see something differently, we interact with it differently. In other words, we will live, inshallah, differently the more we can understand and reflect on the realities of the environment. And without this understanding, and without this with this deeper understanding, any efforts to deal with the problems that we have in our environment will be mediocre and lacking, and they won't be a source of solving the problem at its core. More specifically, inshallah ta'ala, in this series, We want to share also principles, usul, that we can use sort of as a backbone for us in our relationship with the environment. And we want to use those principles, those usul, to reflect on various aspects of the environment, inshallah ta'ala. Praying and asking Allah that this be not only a series that is useful specifically for environmental studies or environmental science studies, but actually any studies of this world, studying any science, these principles, inshallah, will be very useful and instrumental in that study, whether that be on the primary school level or the college level or the graduate levels. It will be, inshallah, will serve that basis to help us do that. Ultimately, also we hope that this will lead to a more commitment to revering the Divine Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, to loving Him Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, for He is the source of this environment, and thus committing more seriously to worshipping Him Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, to obeying Him, to connecting with Him Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, whether that be through our personal acts of obedience to Him, our salah and our adhkar, our fasting and so on, and also through our interaction with the environment itself as a means to worship Him Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. We ask Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala to assist us in this endeavor, to accept us in this endeavor, and to make it a source of khair for all of us. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.